Okay, we're back. We're back in session here, in open session, and the next item on the agenda here is 7B, discussion and consideration to remove drop boxes. I would like to maybe ask our counsel if he could tell us by what statute we are required to have a drop box.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, I believe it's 1-6-9 of the New Mexico statutes.
Say that again, please, so I can write it down.
1-6-9. And to be honest, I spent a fair amount of time trying to find it, was unable to. I think it's just a little small portion of the statute, but I did consult with the clerk and was able to verify that it does.
Could you possibly read that statute?
Oh, this is easy. This is fine. Yeah, yes, it's New Mexico statutes annotated, section 1-6-9. And it gets down to paragraph E, where it talks about the official mailing envelope may be returned by depositing the official mailing envelope in a secured container. So that's the terminology, is secured container, made available by the county clerk to receive voted mail ballots for that election, provided that the location of the containers and the days and times the containers will be available to receive ballots are posted by the county clerk at least 90 days before a statewide election or 42 days before a special election. The location of the secured container is considered a polling place for purposes of electioneering, too close to the polling place in violation of section 1-20-16, where you can't electioneer, you can't try to campaign too close to a poll. All secured containers shall be monitored by video surveillance cameras, and the video recorded by that system shall be retained by the county clerk as a record related to voting pursuant to the provisions of section 1-12-69. Signage at the location of a secured container shall inform voters and those dropping off ballots at the location that it is a violation of law for any person who is not an immediate family member to collect and deliver a ballot for another person. The electioneering is prohibited within 100 feet of a secured container, and the dates and approximate time the ballots will be collected. And then finally, the last paragraph, at least one day, the county clerk or a full-time deputy county clerk shall collect the ballots from the secured containers, register the date and time stamp on each official mailing envelope, and identify the location of the secured container in the ballot register.
Thank you. That helps.
Can I add to that?
Yes, please.
We are following this statute. We have the 24-hour surveillance. We have the minimum required number. It's on the minimum number of required drop boxes. And we chose to place those right here in Roosevelt County, close to the courthouse, because of that last line that says once a day, a clerk or her deputy has to go and pick those up. If we had placed them at all of the polling locations, Floyd, Dora, Elida, then we would have a 90-mile round trip every day for two people, because you can't go by yourself and pick them up. Every day, two people, 90-mile round trip. So we've placed them at the front door of this building, the Jake Lopez building, and the Memorial building, so that we have a 1-mile round trip instead of a 90-mile round trip. They've been in place since August of 2021, which is when this became law. And we've not had a single ballot dropped in one. But we're still mandated to keep that video footage for 22 months, just like as a voting record. And we do that. But we've never had a ballot received in one.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a couple of questions, and maybe some of the other commissioners may have some questions. I thought this, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the statute said that the only one who can place a ballot in a drop box would be the person voting or an immediate family member.
It doesn't say immediate family member. It says authorized person, but that is immediate family member
Or-
caregiver.
What did you say I need?
Immediate family member or somebody's caregiver, like if
A
somebody.
caregiver or immediate family member.
Yeah.
And so since we have had 3 drop boxes and we have never had a ballot dropped in them.
Right.
Okay. So that begs the question, if we're not using them, why do we need them? The only reason we're having them then is because it's mandated by state statute.
Mhm.
So if it's mandated by state statute, then what I would like to know, is that a non-funded mandate? Who pays for them? Who pays for the travel to pick up the ballots?
The Secretary of State's office paid for the drop boxes and the video monitoring and all the equipment that was put into place. We pay for the travel to pick them up. That's why we chose the 1 mile radius and not the 90-mile radius. And it's part of our election budget.
It's part of your election budget. Any more questions?
We do.
Go ahead. No, mine's going to coincide with all agenda items 7B, C, and D. So anything that I say is going to coincide with that. So we have 3 drop boxes. They're unused, proximity of 1 mile. So the cost effectiveness really doesn't hamper us one way or the other, even though the cost is going to be minimal. One of the things I'd like to add is that thus far we have not had any no DA investigations on voter fraud in our neighboring county and in Roosevelt County. And then the other thing that no one's mentioned is voter fraud being illegal. We got to realize that voter fraud is illegal. If there's discrepancies, we've got to find a way that if it is happening, that we need to hold people accountable, punish them to the highest level of the law, because they'll stop doing it pretty quick. So I needed to mention that. Thank you for sharing those videos with us. Although I would have liked to have seen other videos with the opposite opinion, rather than all those lengthy videos, because for me to hear what's going on in Georgia and other states, not that I'm being selfish or arrogant, but I could care less sometimes. Sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes, and especially in situations where we're a very unique county with very unique people, and we're a great county. So I hate comparing myself to anyone else that's committing whatever fraudulent things they're committing. The other thing that I noted was the word probably was used a lot. And I don't care what their party affiliations were, but all of them, I think, used the word probably. And then being vulnerable to compromise. It may be. So there's nothing definite there. With me, the truth doesn't lie. If I find a fact finder who gets paid a lot of money to find the facts, and if he's ever questioned or she's ever questioned, they lose their job if they don't get the facts. I like going with fact finders. I don't like opinionated news. I never have. It's something that's gone on for the last 10 years. So with that, that's part of my testimony for all 7B, C, and D. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lopez.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
wow, I believe there was something that went on in the voting of 2020. As a Roosevelt County Commissioner, in my opinion, we don't have the authority or the legal right to act on these 3 items. We can't make state law. We can't tell the county clerk how to run the elections. And she is an elected official, and she has to abide by the law. And I will support our county clerk. Just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Commissioner Greider. Commissioner Dixon?
Yes. Okay, so I have a couple of things. I know that everything has been checked out. Y'all went down there. I realize that things go on in other places, and I understand. And I think that, do I think there was voter fraud? Yes, probably there was. Do I think it was in Roosevelt County? No, I don't. I do not believe that. I trust our county clerk. I just want y'all to understand that I appreciate everybody coming here and everybody speaking up and working with this and trying to find a solution, because I think that we need to have a solution. I was elected to be a county commissioner. I was not elected to be the county clerk. The county clerk was elected by you people. She was elected to do her job. If she wants to get rid of drop boxes and she wants to do something, I have to support what she wants to do, because at the end of the day, it's her tail on the line. If she gets rid of something that we have to have, if it's state statute that we have it, and we tell her, oh no, we're going to get rid of those, what right do we have? She is exactly the same as we are. She is an elected official. We are not her boss. I would never tell the sheriff what to do in his job, and I'm not going to tell the county clerk what to do in hers. I respect the fact that we want to check into things, and I respect the fact that she watches the videos. She goes over everything. I would like to ask Mandy, is there any way that we can, is there anything that you can think of that we can do that would help to resolve some of these issues? Because I mean, ultimately it's your tail on the line if something goes wrong. So I want to know what your opinion is on how to handle this situation.
Well, I would rather not have the drop boxes either, but it's not an option. It's state statute. So we put them in. There are some counties who haven't yet installed them. They have deeper pockets than we do. They're willing to stand up and say with their checkbook, we don't need those here. We can't afford to do that. So that's why we put the really close round trip, and we still haven't had one used. So I don't worry too much about the drop boxes or ballot harvesting that happens with the mail-in or absentee ballots, because that's not how they're coming back. That's all I got to say on the drop boxes.
So because what I'm seeing on here is the discussion and consideration to remove drop boxes. So I would like to ask council. So if we was to vote that we wanted to remove the drop boxes, what then would happen?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Dixon, the short story is you're fighting an uphill battle with it, because it's by all implication, it's a matter of state law.
Mm-hmm.
State law has pretty much said that you have to have those. So you're kind of going against the authority of the state government. And it's one of those things where the state has the power to preempt local governments and rule a certain way in a certain area. And it looks like they've done that.
Okay.
So if you decide to basically ignore or refuse to follow that law, then there's a number of other things that could happen. I don't know if I want to go into them necessarily, but you're definitely going uphill.
But do we have the authority to tell the county clerk, who's also elected, that she must remove the drop boxes?
I think that's a bit of a difficult question. I think she has to obey state law. So you might be putting her in the position of deciding whether she's going to follow your rule or the state's rule.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I add my
Please.
part of my
Please.
statement? The other thing that I was going to state is that, our clerks are accountable. I know our clerks in the past have all been accountable. We've been blessed with great county clerks since I was commissioner in 2000. But I don't like micromanaging. I don't like questioning the integrity of a clerk. And the other thing that I truly, truly don't like is punishing the good people. If there's those rotten eggs, those handful, we need to find a way to find out who they are. But for my daughters and sons who have been at New Mexico State to not be able to mail in box, even though they're dependent children of ours, still live under our roof, that's just they're gone off to college, would be unfair. Our military, our elderly. If I chose to vote any method, even if it was the drop box, I should have that right. And I shouldn't be punished because of studies out of Georgia or anywhere else. So with that said, Mr. Chairman, I think I'm concluded with my testimonial.
You feel welcome to Make further comments later.
Thank you.
We're going to move on with this. I think we've kind of discussed it, and I think we can come to a logical conclusion on 7B on the removal of drop boxes. So with that being said, I am going to move that we remove drop boxes. Okay. So that is my motion. I move to remove the drop boxes. Thank you. So the question is, shall we or shall we not remove the drop boxes?
Mr. Chairman, I think it dies due to lack of a second.
Yes, sir. Please continue. Do what? Dennis, I didn't understand you. Say that again.
I think that agenda item on 7B will die on the fact that it lacks a second to your
Thank you.
motion.
Thank you, Mr. Lopez. Are you rising to a point of order?
No comment.
I'm going to take it as a point of order.
At your discretion.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Dennis. I appreciate that. And I think that is a legitimate concern. And so we're going to review a little bit of the parliamentary law, and I don't want to come across as a know-it-all. You know, I just think that we often second a lot of motions here, and we've been in a lot of local elections where we second nominations. There's no, you're not in parliamentary error if you second a motion, if you second a nomination, but it's not required. So at the beginning of the year, we passed an ordinance saying that part of that ordinance said, we will follow Robert's Rules of Order, 12th edition. This is Robert's Rules of Order, 12th edition. Okay. This is chapter 49:19. 49:21, procedure in small boards. And this is something that's not new to you because we do it all the time. So I'm going to provide that as a review. Number one, members may raise a hand instead of standing when seeking to obtain the floor, may remain seated while making motions or speaking. Number two, motions need not be seconded. 3, there's no limit to the number of times a member can speak to a debatable question. Appeals, however, are debatable under the regular rules. That is, each member, the chair, can speak only one, each member the chair can speak only once in debate on them, while the chair may speak twice. Okay. Informal discussion of a subject is permitted while no motion is pending. So what are we doing now? What did we do? We discussed a motion when no motion was pending. That's allowable. When the proposal is perfectly clear to all present, a vote can be taken without a motion's having been introduced. Unless agreed by unanimous consent, however, all proposed actions must be approved by a vote under the same rules as larger meetings, except that a vote can be taken initially by a show of hands, which is often a better method in small meetings. The chairman need not rise while putting the question. That's when the chairman takes the vote. It doesn't have to stand up. If the chairman is a member, he may, without leaving the chair, speak in informal discussions and in debate and vote on all questions. So parliamentary rules differ in small committee meetings and boards from those in regular meetings of a large assembly. Number one, the chairman does not have to rise to put the question, and the chairman can speak and debate as any other member of the board. We do that all the time. In a small board, recognition is not necessary. A member doesn't have to stand, address the chair to be recognized to speak. We never do that. We may ask informally, speak, as Mr. Lopez does. It's no problem to allow another member to speak. He doesn't have to gain permission to speak. And then a second is not necessary by the members. And that is Robert's Rules of Order, 12th edition. So in answer to, I know you didn't rise to a point of order because you are so courteous. I appreciate that. But I wanted the people to understand what actually the rules are. And we have discussed this at one time formally about over a year ago, I said, I don't think this requires a second. So in this case, this motion doesn't require a second. It's before the commission to vote now. If there's no further discussion, we shall proceed to vote. So on this motion, or whether or not we not use drop boxes, Mr. Grider, how do you vote? I vote yes. No.
No.
There not being a majority in the affirmative, the motion fails. We will continue to use the drop boxes. Now, that puts us down to B. 7C, I'm sorry. Mail-in voting. Now, mail-in voting kind of follows a similar deal. We've already established that it's by state statute that we do absentee voting, maybe not mail-in voting, but absentee voting. Now, so my question there is, and I'd like to just be sure in my mind what we're looking at, the difference in the mail-in voting and the absentee voting. Because what has happened to me personally is I have received, and I believe Mr. Bennett on personal, there are maybe other people, have personally received ballots for their children who have already registered to vote in Texas. But we received those ballots. I didn't receive them in this election because I had asked Mandy to take my kids off, and I don't think she did. But I believe Mr. Bennett said that in the last election, he received them. So, in question in my mind on these mail-in votings, are we going to continue to receive ballots, or people going to continue to receive ballots without ever having asked for them?
Can I address that?
Yes.
A mail-in, an all-mail election is different than an absentee ballot. An all-mail election only happens when it's a special election. Like we did a school board for Floyd 2 years ago. That's when you receive a ballot for every voter without asking. There are no polling places. There are no place to go on election day. It can only be done by mail when it's a special election. That's not the case in a regular election. In a regular election, a person who wants an absentee ballot has to fill out an absentee application and sign it and submit it, and then we mail them a ballot. You don't get a ballot without an application in a regular election. And I have not removed your children because I have to have their signature to do so. There is some responsibility that lies with the voter to take care of their own
Okay.
voter registration. Same with the Bennett's children. Even though they've registered in Texas, they have not said, hey, New Mexico, take me off the ballot. And Texas doesn't always reciprocate as quickly as other states.
So you're saying that the problem lies with Texas not notifying, who would they notify, the Secretary of State, or would they notify you?
Secretary of State's office.
So they notify the Secretary of the State and it trickles down to you.
Yes. And that's the way it happens with all the states.
Okay. I noticed in the last election, my kids, the ballots didn't come to my house.
That's because they did not request one.
Okay, they didn't request it. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay, so I have a couple things on this one too. So when they are talking about the mail-in, the ballots
Third
that get
party.
mailed, like to the Bennetts and to them, is it a ballot that's getting mailed, or is it the application that's getting mailed?
In the general election and in the primary, it was applications and a
So it's
lot
not
of
actually a ballot, it's
No.
the application.
yes, and they come from third parties. They don't come from our office. They come from Help America Vote. They come from the League of Women Voters. They come from the Republican National Convention. They come from the Democratic National Convention.
Okay,
Everybody sends out an application and says, vote by mail.
okay, yeah.
We don't.
I don't like, but anyway.
Not unsolicited, we don't.
Right. Okay. And so with that, and I want y'all to know, I don't like the drop boxes. I wish we didn't have them. I wish we didn't have mail-in ballots. I wish we didn't have all of this. But by law, we're required to do certain things. So on these also, again, the mail-in ballots, the mail-in ballots are a law, correct?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Dixon, yes. Yes, it's the same situation where state law has preempted.
Okay. So would these be situations, the drop boxes, the mail-in ballots, the Dominion machines, wouldn't these be things that would be better suited since we don't really have the authority to change a state law, to go to legislators or to take this up with the Secretary of State's office and either sue through the Secretary of State to remove or whatever, fight with the Secretary of State to have these removed rather than the individual counties, because we don't really have the authority, but she does have the authority, if I'm not mistaken, to change these laws.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Dixon, I don't think that the Secretary of State has authority to change state laws.
Are
She-
they, but I didn't understand like the drop boxes, if that was that necessarily state law or was that something that she put in her?
That's what I found, is that it is state law.
Okay.
And at first I had thought, for what it's worth, I had thought maybe, because I had such a hard time finding it, that maybe it was like an administrative rule
That's what I was
that
thinking.
the Secretary of State had done. But it turns out it's a state law. It's just very, very discreet, very, very small portion of the statute. So the short answer is, for the Secretary of State, even she has to obey the state law.
So it would be something we need to take to legislation.
That's the best way. I mean, that's the most certain route, is to address it to your legislator and have them address it in the state legislature itself.
Well, with that, I would like to state that even though I don't feel like this is something, and you've mentioned that this is not something that we have the authority to do, I would be willing to, if the commission agreed and, we all were on the same page, I would be happy to go to legislators and talk to them about having this changed, because that would be something we could do, would be carry it forward when we go to Santa Fe to try to get it changed. If we're not able to do it on our level, then I would be happy to go there and try to work on it and see what we could do there.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Dixon, also please keep in mind, insofar as we're talking about absentee ballots and putting that in the same category as mail-in ballots, we also have federal law to deal with.
Okay.
So, and I think there was mention of military
Right.
personnel who are legal residents of New Mexico, of Roosevelt County. You would also want to consider what effect that would have on them and their ability to vote in their own home state elections.
But that would be absentee, correct?
That would be absentee.
Right. Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions?
May I address the anomaly of the absentee voting?
Yes, please.
You were saying the
Yes.
shotgun pattern in
Yes.
the middle. A very big percentage of our absentee voters are overseas military voters and people stationed at Cannon that are deployed somewhere else, and college students. Those populations might have a little bit different view than most of the residents of Roosevelt County. And that does bring everybody closer to center. More votes for Biden than Trump in that population of voters. I feel that that is an explainable anomaly to an extent. Not all of it, but to an extent.
Kind of reminds me of Dennis's talk about it's a maybe.
It is maybe.
Yeah, but thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Speaking on the same subject, I have a lady that lives up in the north part of the Panhandle. She can't drive. She lives by herself, but she can't drive all the way. She has to go to Floyd to vote. This absentee ballot, mail in, because that's the way she does all of it, has to go through the mail. That's her only way to vote. So if we did away with that, that would be depriving that lady or many other people of that right to vote.
That may be why that portion of that statute said or caregiver. I don't know. Just another maybe. But I think people are ready to make a decision on this motion. I'm going to make the motion. I cannot debate against my own motion. But so before I make the motion, I would like to thank those veterans in this group for their service. The necessity for them to vote is very real, and their service is greatly appreciated. Mr. Garcia, I would like to thank you for your service. And I can't debate against my own motion, but I see a clear and evident need probably to continue the absentee voting. But I'm going to make the motion and we will vote. So my motion is to cease mail-in voting, cease absentee voting. And the question is, shall we or shall we not cease absentee voting? Mr. Grider?
No.
Yes.
No.
Thank you. There not being a majority in the affirmative, the motion fails. We will continue to have absentee voting in Roosevelt County. That brings us down to 7D, discussion and consideration to remove Dominion machines. So I'm going to same the question. Same question. Are we required by state statute to use Dominion machines?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
my understanding of state statute is that the statute gives authority to the Secretary of State to contract with companies to use machines, use the voting machines. In this case, it's the Dominion machines. So there again, in that same vein, if we vote to do that, we are going uphill against state law. I think the secretary, or sorry, I promoted you. Our clerk could answer some details on the how and the procurement and all, and how the machines actually come to be used. But the short answer is yes, it's a matter of state law, and the various counties are not equipped under state law to choose which machines or which methods they're going to use.
So the Secretary of State is designated the authority to contract for the machines, right?
Yes.
But she can contract for them, but do we have to use them? That is,
I think the same answer is yes, under state law.
It is. It is. The statute is 1319. It says we must use it.
let me
Doesn't
write that there.
1319. It doesn't say we have to use Dominion. You're correct on that, Mr. Allison. But it does say we must use an optical scan tabulator. We have to use the machine of some kind. Dominion happens to be the one we are under contract with right now through the Secretary of State's office. It doesn't say we have to use Dominion. It says we have to use a tabulator.
We have to use tape. Now, so if we do use a tabulator, okay, what prevents us from doing a hand count in addition to the tabulator?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I think nothing prevents you from doing a hand count if the hand count is 45 days after the election.
Hand counts 45 days after the election. And what is the time frame after the election for us to be required to certify the vote?
I think that the clerk has said that it's 7 to 10 days.
So we're going to be required to certify the vote within 7 to 10 days, and we can only hand count until after 45 days.
That is true.
Thank you.
I'm not saying it works perfectly, but it's true.
No, I'd say that falls short of perfect. Okay. No. We're not taking comments from the section. No question. If there's a question from a commissioner, we'll entertain questions and comments from the commissioners, but not from the audience. Thank you.
I'd like to present the question I asked earlier to Mandy. And like I said, I've spoken to other clerks. Has there been a DA investigation on any tallies that have been done in the past 4 years, 8 years?
Not in the 9th Judicial District.
Number one. Number two, as far as those machines being compromised in Roosevelt County, do you think it would be possible? Let me rephrase that. Would anyone from your staff have the intent to compromise any of those machines?
No. And not any of our poll workers and not
And-
anybody that I know personally.
To compromise, you'd have to be pretty savvy.
Yes.
Do you have checks and balances to ensure that safety and security of our boxes? Okay,
Yes,
thank
we
you.
do.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
I have a couple questions. If it's
Yes,
okay.
Commissioner Dixon, please proceed.
Okay, so those numbers are just, 45 days and 7 to 10 days. That doesn't make sense in some ways. But then I think, well, so it was like I was trying to tell people last time. We have to certify that what we have is accurate information that we've received. That yes, the tabulator says this, and this all match up. We'll send it to you that yes, that's what we received. And then it goes through the line. And then in 45 days, we can double check that what we did certify was accurate. At that point, we can then file our complaint or our grievance or whatever. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Dixon, I think that's basically accurate. Usually the word I'm looking for, the challenges to an election usually occur when it's a very close vote.
Okay.
And usually they have to happen, that challenges have to be initiated by a candidate. And that's the circumstance where you can do the hand count before the 45 days is up.
Okay.
And I could get the clerk to elaborate on that maybe if you want more details.
Oh, no. That's
But
okay.
in most cases, when there's not a close vote or the candidates concede, then it's just not an issue. And so that's probably why the deadlines, the dates have been traditionally allowed to go that way.
Okay.
For what it's worth, I will say that we've been doing an audit in Torrance County of the 2022 primary. And it's not complete yet to my knowledge, but it has come out very, very close to completely accurate to
Okay.
what the machines registered initially and what the hand tally has come up with. They're still working on absentee issues, more to follow on that. But
Okay.
the short answer is that so far the hand tally audit after the fact has proved that the results were reliable from the
Okay.
primary in Torrance County.
Okay, so, and on that 45 days, I also see the flip side of that, that if it's pretty hard to argue something that you haven't certified. So you really need to certify it so you can say, see, this was wrong. Because if we start dipping our hand in there, then it can be blamed on the people that did the hand count. And how are you going to argue that the machine was at fault when you've already been in there playing with the machine and you've been inside it pulling out ballots or whatever?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Dixon, I'll defer that question to the clerk because I think she's probably more familiar with the mechanics
Okay.
of how that works. But I think that the chain of custody issues are always going to be present no matter what, whether it's a hand tally after the fact, after 45 days,
Okay.
or even if it's an election contest within a few days.
And Mandy, is counting the ballots after an election, even if it's 45 days later, is that something that your office is willing to do or?
Yes, we have to appoint a precinct board to do that. It doesn't have to be the same precinct board and it doesn't have to be the commission, but it has to be a precinct board of poll officials to do that hand count. If it's in that 45-day window, then it has to have a court order and the judge or the judge's appointee has to supervise or watch. But
Well, I'm just saying if we have to keep some form of tabulator. Is that something that the clerk's office would be willing to do to ease everyone's mind on
Yes.
the machines or whatever?
Yes, and lots of clerks have done that. We did not do that between the primary and the general because we got a lot going to get ready for the general. But after the general, we could do that. And I know of several polling officials that are willing to do that, willing to help with that.
Okay. I would like to do that. I would like to, after the election, because I know that we're already tied in right now to what we have, correct? It's
Mhm.
so I would like to do that. I would like to go ahead and just hand count them after the election, just to see where we're at here and see how well they matched up after we canvass and everything in the 45 days. After the 45 days, count them, see where Roosevelt County, where we matched up with the machines. If there's any problems, controversy, any errors, we will know for a fact right there.
Okay.
And I can tell you that there are people willing to help, but we'd have to get that together and notify all the parties, the party chairs for Libertarians, Democrats, Republicans, the commission, the newspaper. There's a whole lot of statute about who has to be told what's going on, when it's going on, where it's going on. So it's a process, but it's a doable process, and we can do that after the 45 days.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Are there any other more comment? Okay. Okay. We're on 7D. It's discussion and consideration to remove the Dominion machines, and we've already established that Secretary of State is lawfully entitled to contract for those machines. And it appears that they have the authority to have us use them. I think there may be some other things that may come into play there. So I'm going to move to remove the Dominion machines. And that is the question before the commission. Shall we or shall we not remove the Dominion machines? And I think I can pretty well predict how the vote's going to go. But being that while this question is pending, I'm going to move to postpone this item to the next regular commission meeting to allow more time for our constituents to address their concerns to each commissioner. Because I realize that this particular item of business has come upon us quite rapidly and didn't offer a whole lot of opportunity for the constituents in the various districts to address their concerns with their commissioners. And I would like to offer more time for our constituents and the commissioners as well to maybe educate themselves on whether or not to remove them. It appears quite evident that there are state regulations that we use them, but there may be some other things they can do, perhaps as Commissioner Dixon has indicated she would like to see happen, to maybe come up with some other things that we would like to do along with that. That being said, if my motion is to postpone this to allow more time for consideration by our constituents and the commissioners as well, to maybe think about some of these things like following that, the tabulators counting the votes, the machines counting the votes, and maybe things like, can we do a hand count?
Point of order.
Yes, sir.
I believe you made a motion or move to address the 7D, and then you have changed it, I guess.
No, sir.
It's the very same.
Here, yes, sir. Okay. What I did was I moved to remove the Dominion machines. That's the question. While that question is pending, I moved a subsidiary motion to postpone to a certain time. That motion is debatable, amendable, requires a majority vote. It is a subsidiary. If that postponement is to carry, we will take this item of business up at the next regular meeting. It will come back. The motion to remove the Dominion machines will become pending at the next regular meeting, and we can discuss it more at that time, vote on it at that time. But my motion now is simply postpone the action on it until the next regular meeting. Any further question?
Discussion, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My recommendation would be Commissioner Dixon's proposal. I think that would bring out, shed light on how the accuracy of these machines. If we actually wait for an election and 45 days later, we do the hand tally. We've done hand tallies before. We used to have to do them, and they're accurate. That would be my recommendation. I wouldn't want to be spending anybody's. I love that the public is here, but for them to spend all the time and energy they've already spent on this, I think that once we have numbers, factual numbers, with something as what she proposed, Commissioner Dixon, I think that will literally shed light on this whole issue on this Dominion boxes.
I think I understand what your point is.
Yeah.
Commissioner Dixon, do you have anything to say?
No, I guess I'm just not following because I thought that's what your motion did. When we bring it back at the next meeting, we can amend this item to include that if that's what we chose to do. Is that correct?
When we bring it back at the next meeting, we can either pass or fail whether or not to remove them. Once we have disposed of that out of the business, which would be either if we choose to continue to use them, at that time we can do the motion, pass the motion to have a hand count in addition to that. Okay, we can do it at the next meeting, or the other option would be fail the postponement now, vote on the motion now, offer your motion now, and pass it.
That's what I'd like to do.
So the question is, shall we or shall we not postpone this item of business until the next regular commission meeting? Commissioner Greider?
No.
Yes.
Yes.
No,
There not being a majority in the affirmative, we will not postpone the motion. Okay. So the question now is, shall we or shall we not remove the Dominion machines? Mr. Greider?
No.
Yes.
No.
no,
There not being majority in the affirmative, we will not remove the Dominion machines. Commissioner Greider, Commissioner Dixon, your motion to have a hand count in addition to the machine count would be in order at this time.
I so moved.
The question is, shall we have a hand count?
Mr. Chair?
discussion,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Go ahead, counsel. You're probably going to say exactly what I'm about to say.
Mr. Chair, I think that Commissioner Dixon's proposal for a hand count should be a separate agenda item noticed on a separate agenda.
Your point is well taken.
Thank
Not
you,
on
Mr.
the
Counsel.
agenda. Thank you. Commissioner Lopez, thank you for your attendance.
I would like it placed on the next agenda if possible, please.
Consider it done. Thank you. That concludes 7, new business. We're down to 8. Resolutions, ordinances, proclamations. 8A, considerations of Resolution 2022-40, acceptance of debit credit cards or electronic transfer for payments policy. Lael Sanchez.
Yes, Chairman and Commission, we have been asked by the Department of Finance and Administration from the state to enact a policy or have a policy approved in our county for the acceptance of credit cards for payments or ACH. That is what you have before you. It has been reviewed by Mr. Garcia and he found no issue with. We're just asking for your approval and I will stand for any questions that you may have on it.
Are there any questions? There being no question, we shall proceed to vote.
I move to
We need a
approve.
motion. Yes,
I'll second.
thank you. Okay. Those supporting item 8A and accept and pass resolution 2022-40 2022-40 and accept the debit credit cards for electronic transfer for payments policy, say aye.
Aye.
This is a voice vote. Commissioner Lopez?
Yes.
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 Voice vote, unanimous, motion carries.
Thank you.
8B, consideration of resolution 2022-41, participation in transportation project fund program administered by New Mexico Department of Transportation. Carol Acosta Flores.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So this is consideration for 2022-41 in participation in Transportation Project Fund program administered by New Mexico Department of Transportation.
Are there any questions? We shall proceed to vote. We need a motion to accept.
I'll make the motion to approve agenda item 8B, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Those in favor of accepting the resolution 2022-41, participation in Transportation Project Fund Program administration by New Mexico Department of Transportation, say, please.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
thank you. 4 in the affirmative. Motion carries. We're down to 8C, request for approval of notice of intent for consideration of ordinance 2022-02, a land use moratorium ordinance. Okay. This is what Larry Marker brought to our attention. He read the moratorium. I would ask again. Amber, would you like to read that moratorium? If you want, I will. I have it. Okay, go ahead.
Roosevelt County, New Mexico land use moratorium, be it known on this date, blank. The Roosevelt County Board of Commissioners adopts and enacts this land use moratorium. The subject moratorium is applicable to the use of land for a facility designed or used for any procedure, medical or otherwise, that is intended to terminate a healthy human pregnancy, aka abortion clinic, health center, et al. The subject moratorium is applicable to any land within the legal boundaries or traditional historic community boundaries of Roosevelt County in the state of New Mexico. The subject land use moratorium as enacted also prohibits the permitting of the construction or retrofitting of any such facility on said land. The subject land use moratorium is enacted for an indefinite period of time. This land use moratorium is adopted pursuant to sections 3-1-21 through 3-21-26 NMSA 1978.
Thank you. So that is the moratorium, and you've been provided a study sheet that goes with that. So my motion would be to approve the notice of intent for consideration of the ordinance 2022-02A. It's 22, a land use moratorium ordinance preventing the establishment or operation of an abortion clinic within the confines of Roosevelt County. So is my I think what the counselor has told me is that this requires a 2-week notification, public notice, before we can pass it.
I think that's right. I think that I'm not exactly sure, but I think that's right. And then it maybe is another month or so before it would actually take effect.
Okay.
But I would also like the opportunity to offer a few thoughts on it before
Yes,
there's
please.
a vote, maybe included in the discussion. And as your attorney, I have to kind of point out obstacles for you.
Please.
I want you to know, first and foremost, to understand my perspective, and I don't usually do this, but on a personal level, I want you all to know that I myself, I am pro-life, and I think that The best that can be said about any abortion is it's a tragedy. And I think that it's something worthy that you're attempting to do. I think that there are specific issues with the way we're going about it that I want you all to be aware of before you make your vote. And first, well, there are a couple of issues insofar as it's a zoning matter. One of the biggest problem, if it's a zoning matter, is if you're going to call it a moratorium. Moratoriums, I guess if you're going to use the Latin, it's moratoria, for plural. But generally, they are for short durations of time. It's almost a contradiction to call a moratorium an indefinite moratorium. That's just the same thing as a ban. So if you're going to call it a moratorium, you're usually looking at 90 days, a year, maybe 2 years on the outside for land use types of moratoriums. Part of how that becomes an issue is under the federal constitution and even the state constitution. If you deprive a landowner of a beneficial economic use of their property, it becomes a taking that you have to compensate them for, either temporary or permanent taking. So that's just the land use side of it. The other difficulty is for Roosevelt County, and there's probably a lot I need to learn about your land use process, but we don't seem to have zoning in Roosevelt County. And so you're kind of in a bit of a quandary as to how, under what zoning category you would allow or disallow this, if you're going to use land use as the basis for prohibiting. So those are two problems with the land use aspect of it. The other problem is if you're talking about, and this is future, this is what I'm about to say is all future looking. It's right now on the books. If all things being equal, because the state has not done anything with it, you would not be in a situation of, like, say, violating a constitutional right or a statute. Right now, that is true. If the state Supreme Court decided to find a right to abortion in the New Mexico Constitution, it's theoretical that they could do that. That's kind of how the federal Constitution was read by the U.S. Supreme Court in 1973 when they came up with Roe versus Wade. Not a whole lot good to say about that decision. I think people on both sides of the issue thought that Roe versus Wade was a poorly decided case. So it's probably a little more likely than hypothetical that the state Supreme Court could find a right. If memory serves, they also found a right to same-sex marriage in the state constitution, even though that's not mentioned anywhere in the state constitution. So future potential obstacle. The other one is the New Mexico Civil Rights Act, which is part of the Tort Claims Act, which has made very, very many things civil rights in New Mexico. And if either the state legislature or the state Supreme Court comes up with a right to abortion in the Constitution or just statutorily, what we do here could be seen as a violation of that. And the difficulties there are attorney's fees, damages, potentially punitive damages or something like that, though that's probably not very likely because it's not a known constitutional right at this point. Although, strike that, they did do away with the good faith defense in the State Civil Rights Act. So those are potential obstacles. What I'm telling you is not something to say that you should be pro-abortion. I am not saying that. What I am saying is that those are the potential obstacles you face if you vote for this particular, as it's styled, the land use moratorium. So there are several grounds that it could be challenged on. And there may be other ways to approach the issue that I wouldn't want to discuss in public because it's something that probably is better between you and your attorney. But there probably are other ways to approach it that may entail less potential liability for the county.
We're past the public comment.
Would this be something that we could, table till the next meeting? Discuss with our attorney, whatever those options are that he's talking about. I am pro-life all the way. With that being said, also when we're talking about zoning, I am also about people's right to their property. But I just think that there's more to this than something that we're going to be able to just, I mean, I know I've been racking my brain studying this. I've talked to several different attorneys. I've talked to several different counties. I have researched, I've read all of these sections that's been put out. I have studied this until I don't even know what half of what they tell me means. But I would like to fully understand what we're doing. And I do not want us to get in something that's going to be a loophole for the state or anybody else to be able to come in and put something like that in Roosevelt County, because I do not want abortions in Roosevelt County. I don't want anybody's life being taken in Roosevelt County, be it a baby, be it anything. I don't like that at all. So I would like us to find and be able to go through this and make sure that whatever we do, that we're doing fully with the attorney showing us what we need to do to make sure we're not doing something wrong, something that's going to get us. I'm not as much worried about getting in trouble as I am them being able to find a way through the back door to put one in here, because we didn't cover some kind of ground.
I understand. Any more questions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I've got just a comment real quick or question. Thank you for that legal advice. Could this moratorium, you mentioned 90 days or up to 2 years that it could be in effect. Then you mentioned no zoning in Roosevelt County. Could this be a work in progress moratorium where we, as the commissioners, could amend it as needed, as per legal counsel advice?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Lopez, I'm not entirely sure I understand. Is it something, are you saying that it's something that you could
Well,
pass and then work on as you go?
amend as we go. Like if we find out some of the unanswered questions we have right now, i.e. legal questions, or what? I mean, is there like a sense of urgency for this moratorium? I've never heard of any abortion clinic one come into our county anytime soon,
And-
or where it would be imminent.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Lopez, I think once you pass a moratorium, it still has the effect of prohibiting if you pass it. So going back to the earlier statement about setting times on it, it's definitely more of a moratorium if it does have a limit. But if it's open-ended, then it's really essentially a ban. And I'm not sure if that answers your
It does.
question.
It does.
Okay.
Okay, can I ask another question, Commissioner Savage?
Yes, please. Anytime.
So, can we pass this without having zoning? Because we don't have any zoning laws right now. Is this something we could pass without zoning laws now?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Dixon, my best answer to that is you're better off passing zoning first,
Okay.
because you are the zoning authority for the county. You are. But from what I was able to find in your ordinances, I didn't find a zoning statute, or I'm sorry, a zoning code, a zoning ordinance. So you don't have any zones established. You don't have any places to regulate what kinds of businesses occur in certain zones, residential or agricultural or commercial, whatever. So you're on a whole lot weaker footing if you don't have the zoning code already established.
Okay, and when you do zoning, I know I'm asking 100 questions, I'm sorry. When you do zoning, do you have to do it in like districts if you zone in districts, can you ban something in every single district as a whole, or?
If they're otherwise illegal, yes. If they're legal, then you probably have to regulate which zones they go into.
Okay, because that's what I'm thinking, because this is just in the air, so
Right.
I was wondering that. And one more thing. Even if we was to do this, am I not correct that it is not applicable to any state or federal property, facility, if it's a state hospital, if it's state land, i.e. college property, anything like that, if they have a clinic, this still would not apply to them either, would it?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Dixon, I think that's accurate. I think you can only regulate, you can only legislate for the unincorporated area of Roosevelt County. So anything that's incorporated, like Portales or any other city in Roosevelt that is incorporated, you cannot regulate in their territory.
But even if they did and did a moratorium just like this in Portales, but if there's state property in Portales, from what I've read, this a moratorium is not applicable to any state or federal land or entity or private entity loaned located on state property.
I think that that's probably accurate. I think that as far as state or federal property, we can't dictate what they do on their property. Usually there are cooperative arrangements with state and federal operations, but in short, you can't regulate what they do on state or federal property.
Thank you. I think I'm finished.
Any more questions? The item on the agenda is to request approval of notice of intent to consider the ordinance. And that would have to require a public notice that we are going to consider it. And if we do that, if that were to pass, then we would take this up again. We would give public notice now that we're going to consider it at the next meeting. And that will give us time to investigate some of these other options that our lawyer is advising us to consider. And since we can't pass this motion now because it requires public notice, I think our best option is yes. Let's approve this notice of intent. Let's pass this, and then at the next meeting, we can say yes or no on the moratorium, because we can't vote yes or no on the moratorium now.
Right, but can we do that? Can we even pass an intent without zoning already in place? We can do that, right?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Dixon, yes. Yes.
Are there any questions? I'm going to make the motion that we adopt 8C. Now it's pending. And so if you want to make a comment, now's your chance. And as far as I'm concerned, I do not want to have any abortion clinics. I agree with them. Most of their people who spoke on it in this meeting were very much in favor of having any abortion clinics in our county. I agree with my constituents. I'm adamantly opposed to any abortion clinics in our county. That's my personal view. And I'm kind of like that old bum on Big Rock Candy Mountain. I'm heading for the Big Rock Candy Mountain. I won't be turned. I've my mind made up. I will never vote or be in favor of an abortion clinic. Mrs. Lloyd, I appreciate your comments. I agree with her wholeheartedly. And so I'm ready to vote. If any other, and I would honor any comments from any other commissioner because I think our commission, what I like about our commission is we have our constituents at heart. We may share difference of opinions, but we come to this meeting, we voice our opinions, we come as friends, we voice our opinions, we vote, we leave as friends. And so if there's anyone that has any more comments, I sure want to hear them. Yeah, but if you're ready to vote, I'm ready to vote on initiating the notice of intent.
So if we vote on this, when we vote, because I don't want any abortion clinics here. So if we vote on this, it's not set in stone that this is going to be the exact thing that we'll vote on. This, we're just voting on the intent, and we can change it up, fix it up, whatever, correct?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Dixon, yes.
Perfect. I'll run over here.
Are you ready to vote?
I am.
Any comments, Mr. Lopez?
No, sir, I was just waiting for you to entertain a motion.
Okay, well, my motion is that we approve 8C and approve the notice of intent. Mr. Greider?
Yes.
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 Thank you, Mr. Lopez. Vote is unanimous. 8C carries. And we're down to 9A. To procurements, contracts, and agreements, 9A. Y'all not gonna leave us now, are you?
Ramsey.
Hey, y'all come on back. We got plenty of chairs.
Lunchtime, you don't want to miss his line at the cafe.
We only have.
9A is the request for approval of Seventh Amendment to the agreement for detainee health care services at Roosevelt County Detention Center. Shayla Ramsey, in her absence. Member Hamilton.
Yes, Mr. Vice Chair, Commissioner. So presented in your packet was the Seventh Amendment. This is something that we've been working on with WellPath. This is our final amendment. It will have to go out for RFP at this next contract year. Included in there was some necessary adjustments to staffing. We were able to reduce some of the MAT hour staffing specific for the grant program. We have everything else highlighted. You did see the increase that we talked about within the workshops as far as the increase, the one-time increase that we had to sustain for staffing and everything. So other than that, I would stand for any questions and ask for your approval as they are continuing to provide services at our facility.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I move we approve 9A.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion? Those supporting the motion to approve the request, approve the Seventh Amendment to agreement to detainee health care services, 9A, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. The ayes have it, and the motion carries. We're down to 9B, request for approval of contract renewal for provision of diesel fuel for the Roosevelt County Road Department with Red Rock Oil Company. Rick Levato, in his absence, Amber Hamilton.
Yes, so also included in your packet was the renewal for the provision of diesel fuel with Red Rock. They have continued to meet the contract obligations and exceed those expectations with Mr. Lotto, and he asked for approval of the renewal of said contract.
Do you have a motion?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second? Go ahead. Thank you.
Is this a roll call vote?
No.
Approval of a contract? Definitely. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Lopez?
Yes.
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 Thank you, Mr. Greider. Now we're down to C. That motion carries. We're down to C. Request approval of contract renewal for hauling road materials for Roosevelt County Road Department. The C&K Cattle, Mr. Levato, in his absence.
Yes,
Ms. Hamilton.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners. So also included was the renewal in yours. They continue to meet their contract obligations. Mr. Lovato is able to get the trucks he needs at the time he needs to and would ask for the renewal of said contract.
Any discussion? Are you ready to vote?
Yes, sir.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
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 I need a.
Four
I need
yes
a
votes?
We need a
motion.
motion.
I'll make a motion.
I made the motion.
Well, I'll say.
We missed it.
Well, it happened pretty fast. You better hang on. Well, I'll second it. Now we're down to voting.
Yes.
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 All right. We're down to D.
Thank you.
The motion carries, by the way. D, request for approval of grant agreement for RAID RAID grant, project number RAID FY 23-24 for $22,204 from the New Mexico Environmental Department. Carol Acosta Flores.
Yes, this is a request for your approval for the grant agreement to enter into this grant from RAID. The RAID stands for Recycling and Illegal Dumping Fund from the Environmental Department for $22,204.
Mr. Chair, I move we approve.
Second. Any discussion? Those in favor of approving 9D, the grant agreement for the RAID grant project, say aye. Do we need a voice?
Roll call. Yes,
Roll
please.
call.
Yes.
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 Motion carries. Four yes votes. We're down to 9E, request approval to accept the grant award for transportation project grant, $2,734,787.80 in the New Mexico Department of Transportation. Ms. Flores.
Yes, this is a request for your approval of the grant award from New Mexico Transportation Project Fund Grant for $2,734,787.80 from New Mexico Department of Transportation.
Mr. Chair, I move we approve.
Second. Any discussion? We're going to vote. We're going to take a voice vote. We want to say that I have had several phone calls and several personal conversations commending you, Mr. Lovato, Mrs. Hamilton, on obtaining this grant. They, especially people are very well pleased, and I concur with the performance of Mr. Lovato and the maintenance of our roads. So we're ready to vote.
Yes.
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 Yes. We're down to the motion carries, unanimous vote. We're down to 9F,
Thank you.
discussion of drafted joint powers agreement for the City of Portales Dispatch Services. Commissioner Savage, Amber Hamilton. Mrs. Hamilton, I would ask you if you would please bring us up to date on that.
It's been a long morning.
Yes, sir. Commissioner, so following our discussion that's been ongoing, we've had this matter on our agenda consistently each meeting, and we were, both myself and Commissioner Savage were working to get something presented. Where we're at is still a little ways apart, as you will see, between the draft the draft 6 that the city provided and the amended restated joint powers agreement that the county provided as draft. The county's draft included feedback from the sheriff's office in regards to the establishment of a governing board. You will note one of the big significant differences is that the city does not want to move toward a true governing board. They are proposing an oversight board. There are some other minor differences after that, but that seems to be one significant difference. But again, we've been working on this. We provided our copy August 18th, our draft. We received their draft on September 14th, which did not really allow for enough time to get Mr. Garcia up to speed on all of this. But again, we are honoring our commitment to bring it to the agenda and let the commission discuss and review everything. This is something that, again, the commission was provided back on the 18th of August when we sent out our draft that we had put together. So all of that to say that we are close, but I wouldn't say we were necessarily much closer because the modifications, it was hard for me to find any of the modifications the city made between the last draft and this one. You may have discovered some different ones. But the big concern, of course, was the lack of a governing body versus oversight board that has the ability to input. And so I have everyone seen this. We shared it with the sheriff's office. I did ask that they also attend, as they might have some comments on the structure of this and the content as it pertains to this agreement. Is that enough?
I think so. Officer Bowen.
Yes, sir.
I sure want you to get in here where you can, then you're a council member. I sure want to include you in this. I would like to welcome any comments from the sheriff. Go ahead, Mr. Parker.
I think y'all missed me because you put this last on the agenda, so got to stay here. I did also review the contract of the JPA. I agree with Mrs. Hamilton. I don't see many changes at all. Aside from wording, there's still no regional dispatch to this JPA. It's still just an advisory committee. It still leaves control solely to the city's discretion, as well as the city police department. And I think we're still a long way apart as well. And Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I'd answer any questions if you have any.
Mr. Chair and Commission, I guess I should also present, when Commissioner Savage and I went in, we did ask and we proposed several options because time seems to be a concern, like how fast we can make this happen. And so we're just saying, hey, let's work on it this year. We think we can completely do this. We are two very capable entities that have a long history of working together. We can continue to do this. So what we asked was, what's realistic? Since it is a JPA that would involve all of these others, so we have 4 incorporated municipalities or townships, villages and such that would include with volunteer fire departments, ENMU, as well as the city and the county, then is it realistic to say, let's get the JPA through by December 31st or something and have that goal, and then have the board set, because the board's clearly identified as to who would be put forward on that, the sheriff or their designee, the chief of police or designee, the fire chief or designee, ENMU, police chief or designee, and then 1 volunteer fire department representative, whoever they so choose. So you have your 5 governing board members. Would it be realistic to put those in place and say, hey, after we get this JPA through everyone, the end of December, we can have our board sitting in place in January, allow the board to develop a job description for the executive director of said dispatch center, and allow them 3 months to put together time or whatever it is. So by the end of the 3rd quarter of the fiscal year, you have your job description that you can then post. And then that allows a quarter to go ahead and make that hire, start making the transition. Again, you're still financially supporting all of this. We were just asking for some measurable benchmarks, as Commissioner Savage has presented on several occasions, as to goals. Like, we really just feel like we have to have some goals in place of things that need to be achieved so that we can truly see if this is going to be the joint powers agreement where the commission and the county give up their governing authority and their ability to have that, then where is the presence of that board? And so that was something that we did present. We have not yet seen it included in the draft agreement, but that was our recommendations.
I understood what she said, but it's coming pretty fast. And do y'all have any questions?
No, but I have comments.
Okay.
Okay, so I went through both of these again. Well, ours again, and then this one. So the one they sent, I agree with y'all. I don't see much difference. I do note that on the second page, the first paragraph, they do leave out a rural municipality chief again for one of the volunteers. That is left out again.
And they also, ENMU chief.
And I don't like that. So that needs to change. And then I was noticing, and then, that's just one thing I was noting, because, because they had that marked and just omitted those 2 people. There's a whole lot of other stuff that's omitted. The one thing that's on ours that I would like to see change is, and again, I know I'm on the volunteer fire department in Elitas, so I'm going to throw that out there for everybody to know. But when we are going down through here and the percentages, when we're breaking them down, at 20% for Roosevelt County, 69 for the city of Portales, 7 for NMU, and then all of your small towns, Elida, Dora, Floyd, and Causey at 1%. I don't know how we're coming to 1% on that, because I know, being on the fire department there in Elida, we do not have hardly any calls within the city limits of the municipality. I think Dora had last year 6. All of our calls are in the county. I realize that we have a fire district, but that's still Roosevelt County residents. And I feel like 1% for these small towns and villages is a lot, considering they're going outside of their municipality to do it. They are going within the county to do it. So that's that on that. And it has it under the contribution, and then it has it again under another one under, it has it down there on maintenance as well. So
Can I ask a question on that, Commissioner Dixon?
sure.
In reference to your 1%, I realize that y'all work a lot of traffic crashes because you got Highway 70 running through your district. But the majority, and Amber, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the majority of the county the county EMS calls are fire calls. Do you agree with that? That most of them are fire runs and instead of EMS that are out in the county? Besides maybe taken into Elida, because again, y'all work more traffic
Right.
crashes.
We do a lot of traffic crashes, but we take EMS and fire to both. If it's a crash, we've got our rescue from the fire, plus we have our ambulance.
Yes, ma'am. I was just wondering how the state fire, how much you get paid for responding to those fires and stuff, how much that would come into the equation as well, as far as monies
Right.
for calls.
So we get paid, of course, we'll get paid from EMS on ones. It depends on, if we're cutting somebody out or if it ends up being a fire out there. But most of our EMS calls and everything are within the county. But again, our areas are like the ambulance in the rural fire departments are controlled by the PRC. They set our boundaries. We could say to the PRC, hey, you know what? When we do our evaluation, we want to only do within the city limits of Elida. We want it to change to be in the city limits of Elida. It's not going to change anything for us. We're still going to get paid for those runs right there in the city of Elida. And we're not going to get money outside, but we're not going to be going outside. It takes the PRC, and then it goes before the council, and then it's done. And it can be set to just within the city limits. When you do it with the fire, it goes for when they come in and they do our ISO rating. We get the same amount because we have 2 fire stations. So our ISO funding is the same right there because we have the 2 fire stations. We can again do the same thing there where you set your boundaries within the city limits, or you can set it a mile, whatever. You take it before your council, it goes back before them, and they can change their boundaries to where it's not all over the county. And I'm not saying that Elida would do that because
Right.
they would go and respond. But I'm saying these municipalities, these small volunteer fire departments, they have other options. They don't have to have their boundaries set that far out. They can change that. And then if they did, then that's going to leave the county liable to put fire departments out there, or to have Mill and Sand or Arch to respond. We had a bad crash the other day. It was 20 miles from Elida towards Roswell. We went out there. It was really bad, and it took 2 care flights. Portales responded out there, even though that wasn't theirs. They did respond because of the fact that there's 2 care flights, and it was a mess, which they didn't have to. So I'm saying, there's got to be a little bit of give and take, but I just feel like 1% on these volunteers, because I think that's going to be hard for some of them to come up with. Is a full 1%, I think might be hard for them. And I may be wrong. But I think that if we're going to talk about negotiations and we're going to include them in a contract, like this contract that we're trying to get through, have we done anything with those municipalities to say, hey, you're getting included in this contract that we're all signing you on for 1%. Have we verified that or have any contract with those municipalities to agree to that 1% that we're putting in our contract?
That's a good point.
That's all I'm asking. And I don't know if you have or not. I haven't heard anything at our fire meetings or anything about that or that 1%. So I didn't know. Had you talked to any of the different municipalities about the fact that they're included in a contract at 1%?
So, Mr. Vice Chair, Commissioner Dixon, this is something that is just draft based on what the city of Portales provided. So I know that I have provided the data that the city provided as far as the calls and the percentages and such to the ones that asked, like ENMU and such, but it has not been one where we're just trying to negotiate with the city and put forward a draft of something to approach as to what they would recommend. This is based on about 1,196 pages of calls that Commissioner Savage went through to actually reflect the percentages. He went through every one of the dispatch calls for a couple of years of periods. And so that's where all of this data, it wasn't an easy report that we got access to. Commissioner Savage actually spent days looking
Oh, I
through
can
all of
imagine.
that data and everything while we were working on some of this other. And so we don't have theirs. What we said is that we felt it was important that they were part of this, that they need to be represented on the board, and then it needs to go before their governing body. I'm in no place, none of us are, to speak for any of those governing bodies. We just felt like it was imperative that they were included, and they had not been included until we were bringing them forward. So we feel like it's imperative, if they're being provided the same services that our sheriff's office is and everything, that those are also actively reflected in this agreement and that they have a chance to review it and put forward their own percentage or what they can agree to. My understanding is that several of the representatives that have been at some of these joint meetings have said, and we've heard them verbally say, well, why can't we all put in a percentage? Why can't we all pay our part? So that is what would just need to be reflected here. None of that's been determined. This is just based on the initial data that we've received on the call volume.
Right. And I agree. And I think they should, everybody should put in and be a part of it. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't put forth money, because yes, everybody should pay their part, but I just wanted to take that into consideration and see when it was listed, had them listed, if they had even been talked to or where they were at on that. So I'm finished. Thank you.
The way I understand it, we based percentages on data supplied to us. The calls for service data supplied to us by the city.
Mhm.
Look at those pages and estimate and calculate, okay, what is our part? What is their part? Find out everybody wants to pay their share. Nobody wants, everybody has a positive attitude, willing to pay their share. But so what Ms. Hamilton was saying, I'm probably saying the same thing, is we based those percentages for a working draft based on the calls for service. the
For their
number of-
district.
For those separate entities, in our estimation, this is what we think would be fair for them to pay based on the information we had on the number of calls for service.
Okay.
And it's not in concrete, it's a working draft. We welcome input, and I appreciate your comments. And that's, so as far as I'm concerned, yes.
Okay, and Commissioner Savage, so to add on that, so when we get these calls, again, 1,196 pages, it may have an address, it may not. It may have an address that's real, it may not. It may have a general area past 42 trees and 6 windmills.
Mhm.
Sorry, I'm tired apparently, but it's just there's no way to actually calculate exactly where it is. What we can go through is see who was the activated or dispatched entity.
Okay.
And that's what we can attribute. There is no way to be able to accurately pinpoint exactly where everything was, who went out there, who was responsible, if it was in the county, if it was in the city. They all received their funding differently. What we would point out is, again, the Portales draft only contains signatory stuff for the county and for the city.
Okay.
Our draft has the county, the city, and all the other 4 municipalities that are in townships, villages, that should be included, because we feel like it's imperative to be representative of the whole.
I agree. Yeah, I think this one needs some more. Theirs needs to have more added to it because they admitted way too much.
Okay, thank you. Officer Bone, do you have any comment?
Deputy.
Well, I gave the contact information to the director that runs the Lee County Dispatch to the city manager. If she had any questions, I honestly feel like that lady has, Mr. Savage, you went down there with us. She has a lot of good information on how that dispatch center is run. I feel like the city and the county should invite her down here and speak with the commission and the council and say, hey, this is how I run my ship, and it's run pretty tight. It's something that I think we should go to. But also on Ms. Dixon's, I believe that the city, the county, the rural municipalities, Eastern, we all need to get together in a meeting and say, yes, I want to be in the region or the regional dispatch center, or I don't, or this is how much I can be put in. We're just guessing on how much Eastern can put in, or, the rural fire departments.
Thank you.
But I honestly think contacting that lady who runs the Lee County Dispatch, bringing her down here to speak, it would be a great idea. So.
Thanks.
Thank you. So this 9F is just a discussion of the joint powers agreement. It requires no action. It's for information only. So I guess that if there are no further comments on that, we'll proceed on to number 10. Yes, Mr.
So I'm just curious, do we rewrite it and send it back now? Where does it go from here?
I don't know. We submitted our draft. Basically, our draft was a 5-member board, a governing board, not an oversight board, but a governing board. Their return was, and that was a 5-member board, the chief of police, the county sheriff, you're going to help me out there.
Fire chief.
The fire chief,
Eastern.
the NMU chief, and one representative from the other departments in the county would be an elected their elected representative to support them, to try to include everything. But I think when it came back, on their proposal, they removed the representative from the counties, and they removed the NMU fire chief. We thought that they should be included because we provide service to them, and they get a lot of calls. The other part of that was the what we proposed was an at-will employee who served at the pleasure of the governing board. They're paid by the city, but they are an at-will employee that are governed by the governing board. What their proposal there was in return was that we will have 2 directors of the dispatch center, and they will report to the lieutenant, to the, what's his title?
Deputy police chief.
The deputy police chief. And the deputy police chief will then accept recommendations from the board. So there's no direct supervision by a board. It is, this board is to make recommendations to the deputy chief, who the dispatch director will report to. And so what we did, so that's not exactly what our proposal was. We want a governing board, and we want an at-will employee responsible to that board. In our negotiations and conversations with Mr. Miller and Mrs. Austin, they have indicated very strongly that yes, they want to move in that direction. They also indicate to us that they do want to have an at-will employee run a dispatch center responsible to the board, but they just can't get it done at this time. We just can't do that. It's just going to take a lot of time. We want to do it, but we just can't do it. It's going to take too much time. So that's where our position is. Yes, we want to give you, commission is designated $175,000, but in order for us to justify that, we need what I would call measurable benchmarks. We want to provide this assistance, but in order to justify this much money to our constituents, we need to see that we're making progress and not just write you a blank check. And so how we're going to proceed from here, we're, Ms. Hamilton and myself, we're certainly open for comments from the commission. I think the commission is kind of aware of our situation. We did a lot of studying. We presented them with what we thought was a fair offer, and they went into executive session, came out of their executive session, said, Commissioner Savage, we're going to accept your offer. We're going to accept your offer. But when we got their offer in writing, it was quite a bit different than the offer that we made. So we're still making progress. I don't know how to continue to make progress, but we're making progress. And all I'm saying is we're going to do what we can, because this needs to be resolved as soon as possible. But I do think we owe it to our constituents to have these measurable benchmarks. If we're going to spend their money, then they need to know that it's being justified, how we're being spent. So I don't know. We're open for suggestions. And
What do y'all think about doing another group,
another joint
joint
a lot
meeting?
of the meeting with everybody. But if we have another meeting, it's something that our commissioners need to go prepared
Right.
with some advice and to have a dialogue with the councilman, because I think there are some council members they're good people. They're concerned people. They want to do what's best for our community. And, our constituents are their constituents. We're serving the same bunch of people. And I think that we might be able to make some of that progress if we had that type of meeting. But we can't go to that meeting unprepared and just kumbaya, pat each other on the back and leave. We've got to go prepared. So,
And I think we ought to be able to speak to like the sheriff when we're in the meeting. If we have a question, why would we ask a question when the sheriff or the chief or the fire chief or one of the municipal fire chiefs are there and we cannot ask them a question? We're just going to leave it up in the air because they're not allowed to speak. If we want to ask them a question, I think we ought to be able to ask them a question while we're in the meeting.
I think we're making some progress here, because I share your thoughts exactly. I can see why we've been having a meeting with the city council, and the ones able to speak are council members and commissioners, when the two most knowledgeable people on where the money's going, how it's spent, the two most knowledgeable people in the room are Mrs. Hamilton and Mrs. Austin. So the type of deal to where nobody can speak but the people that are the least knowledgeable, such as myself, that shouldn't happen.
Right.
So, I think that I think that's a good idea that we move in that direction, because I think, especially after going to Hobbs and Lovington and looking at the regional dispatch center, and we went to the regional dispatch center board meeting and saw how they conducted their business, and the spirit and the enormous amount of respect that they showed to each other, and the professionalism in which they conducted their meeting. That, in conjunction with their expertise and willingness to share by their dispatch manager. Uh, I think that there's opportunity for us to get together and discuss some of these things. I think that we have from my sharing that experience with Lieutenant Sanchez, Mr. Bowen, and Mrs. Cordova. I think that there can be a very positive relationship between the council and the commission.
Mhm.
I think that it might be something we need to look strongly at, is getting together with all of us. But it needs to be something we go prepared to do, share our thoughts, do some research on our own, go prepared to enter into a dialogue. And I think we can accomplish something like that. And since we've gone back and forth with just two negotiators from both sides, and we're just not making as much progress as I hope we would, might be better now for us all to get together and see if we can't iron something out.
And if I can, Commissioner Savage, the other thing to add is, we can only say, like, we committed and said we're going to have, like, our goal is to have something on the agenda by September 20th. Now, it wasn't the ultimate of what we really wanted to present. It wasn't something that we felt like we could ask a vote on because there's still quite a ways apart between the two. We're not certain, like, how much this has been shared on the negotiating part. Obviously, we're happy to share with the other municipalities and everything as well. These are public documents. These aren't anything super secret or great or anything along those lines. We took ours, molded it very similarly from Lee County, which is an agreement we know has already gone through the Department of Finance. It's already been approved as a JPA, so we know the function itself works. We were just trying to find something to start with and work toward in terms of some type of legal agreement that has the pertinent parts and everything that's included to it. But I think it would be important. I know I didn't see it listed on the agenda for the city council tonight, so I think it's important that the city council sees all that. I know y'all had binders that we prepared that had a lot of that information in it. You'll need to please get those back to me so I can get more information in there so that y'all can have more to read and everything to move forward. But we can certainly do that. And we can also ask to make sure that they share this with their council members entirely and also provide it to the other 4 villages, municipality, township type situations so that they have those as well. And then encourage and ask to have one joint meeting with all those parties that are interested present, and also reiterate the point that we want to have open dialogue with the necessary officials in the room, not just the governing bodies.
Is there any way we could get a message to them, an email to her today so they could ask them tonight when they're all there at the meeting? Maybe they can figure out, because it wouldn't have to be an agenda item. So, but they would all be there to pick a date, maybe, to get us something going, because, and quit lollygagging. This is dragging out way too long, and we need to just find an answer. Good, bad, or indifferent, we need to find a solution to this problem.
I'm happy to send an email. We provided our information the 18th of August, and we have been waiting. We followed up the first week of September to get to this point where we have another draft. And so we received that on the 14th. We feel like we've met our timetables. Please know we're not lollygagging on our delay. We've been very diligent on this and spent a lot of time and a lot of effort. But I'm happy to send an email today. We can get that to them. I don't know if they'll discuss it or not, but we can at least present that. And somebody's in the room that is hearing all this, so that's great.
I will mention it to the other council members. We do have an executive session, so I can mention it.
Okay, good.
I honestly agree that a meeting between us, and then we can also invite Eastern and then the rural fire departments. And I believe also that the community should speak. I don't know what the issue was with the last time, but Mr. Miller was holding that meeting. So.
Yeah. I just felt like there was a lot of things that we could have asked one of them that was sitting in the audience to answer some of the questions we had, and all we would do is like, well, I don't know yet. I don't know that answer. Well, the answer was sitting right there, but we couldn't ask them.
I can't agree with you more. Like I say, the next meeting, hopefully we have, we can get everybody there and like I said, Eastern, the rural fire departments, the Dallas Fire Department, we can all say, yes, we all want to go in and this is what we can contribute. Because I think we're just using the middleman person. But and also I think we need to invite the lady from the county. If we have any questions.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
You done? Thank you. Thank you. We'll move on to item 10, executive session. Pursuant to 10-15-1,
I guess we need one. Executive session.
NMSA 1978-87, attorney-client privilege information pertaining to threatened or pending litigation, specifically Hernandez versus Roosevelt County, Porter versus Roosevelt County, Aguilar versus Roosevelt County, Padilla versus Roosevelt County, Johnson versus Roosevelt County, Ramirez versus Roosevelt County, Ortiz versus Roosevelt County, and to discuss attorney-client privilege information relating to pending or threatened
Oh, okay.
litigation. I move we enter the executive session.
Second.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are in executive session.